Hello, and thank you for joining us for what we hope is a helpful how-to guide for making corrections to correct data based on a cumulative QA report or quality assurance report. This session is intended mainly for SurveyMonkey users, but could also be helpful for those submitting data via data file templates. This session will provide a live walkthrough of a cumulative QA report and a longitudinal data extract. We'll also provide a live demonstration of the corrections process where Jessica will actually walk through how to identify an issue and then how to correct that issue in the longitudinal data extract. We will also share some helpful tips specific to SurveyMonkey users. With that, I am handing it to Jessica to begin the demo.
All right, so I'm going to be walking through some of the QA files and also working through some examples to show how you might make some corrections to your data. And I'm going to start with the longitudinal data extract. This file is basically all of the data that you have submitted through SurveyMonkey to us to date. And you can see that the data is separated into the three different modules: petitioned individuals, system referrals, and care inquiries. And so I'm going to use petitioned individuals as the example here. It looks a little daunting at first because it is a very long data set, as you can see. But I just want to familiarize some of you with the format since it does look very different from SurveyMonkey. So in SurveyMonkey, you go through the survey, answer questions one by one, and it's kind of a similar concept here, but each question is represented in its own column. So you'll see starting in column D here, this is where the data starts, that each column represents its own data point. So you'll see in the first row that they have the data point number here, and then also the data point name. And so the data point number is helpful in case you need to refer to the data dictionary to look up any specifications for the data point. And you'll see that for the most part, each data point corresponds to one column. So we have the reporting month, county, name, and so on. But then you'll come across some data points such as this one here, 3.3.9 original petitioner, and you'll see that it spans over multiple columns. And this is because you can answer multiple responses for this data point. So you can select multiple petitioner types. And so this is a key concept of this data extract in that single choice questions only appear over one column, whereas data points you can select multiple answers to will appear over multiple columns, with each column being a single answer choice. And so, staying on this example of original petitioner, I want to highlight one more thing about this data extract, and that is the use of value code numbers here, as you can see, rather than text descriptions. So this is a little bit different from SurveyMonkey in that when you're going through and making your selections, you're seeing the whole text description. Like you'll see family member, right? And you'll check that. But when making corrections to this data extract, we ask that you use the value code option associated with each answer choice. So if we take this example, so we'll look at the family member option for original petitioner. We'll see that in order to indicate that this individual has a family member original petitioner, they use the value code of 2. And so the reason that we know it's 2 is that if you go back to the data dictionary and go to the data point 3.3.9 original petitioner, you'll see that the value code 2 corresponds with the family member value there. So if you need to make any kind of corrections to the actual answer choices you're providing, we just ask that you make sure that it's the value code rather than the text description. And the very last thing I want to go through about the format of this data extract is that As you know, in SurveyMonkey, as you go through the survey, it shows you questions depending on which care status you are reporting for. And now, obviously, with this data extract, we have to lay out all the data points associated with all care statuses. So just keep in mind that depending on the care status of the row, you'll see that certain data points have data while others do not. Obviously, this is because you're only answering specific data points for each care status, but we just want you to keep that in mind as you're reviewing this data extract. All right, and so with that, I think I'm going to move on to the other file here, which is the QA report. And so the QA report is just showing you where any data issues were found in your SurveyMonkey data. Once again, please don't make any corrections to this file. You should be making all your corrections to the data extract, which is what you'll be submitting back to us. And so this is more of a guide to locate where the issues are in your data. And once again, all of the QA issues are separated into their own individual modules. But where I would actually start first is this last tab. It's called Identifier Anomalies. And so this tab is showing you a specific kind of QA issue, and it's a QA issue that's related to these very critical identifier data points, such as petition case number, social security number, date of birth, name, and so on. And so this is really just a guide to go back into your data and make sure that all identifier data points for a given individual are consistent throughout all your data. So there are also a couple columns in the data extract that will help you locate where these identifier issues are observed. So if we go back to the data extract real quick, we can see that there's this first column here. It has a potential identifier issue. And so if you just filter to where the X's are, that will show you the rows that have specifically identifier issues. And so you'll need to make corrections to the identifier data points in those rows and make sure they're consistent for each individual. So we can walk through an example here. And so I'm going to show both files at the same time, just so it's easier to refer back to each of them. So here is the identifier report on the bottom here. And then the longitudinal data extract I will show here on the top, if it will let me. Okay, perfect. So looking at the identifier report here, we can see that there's only one issue for this county related to identifier anomalies, and that is for this individual, John Doe, it looks like. And so we can see, we also just want to make one check before we start making corrections. So you'll take a look at the person ID for John Doe, and that is 101. And so we'll look at the corrections that we're making here, and we have the rows, and it does look like we're making corrections to 101. So you just want to confirm that, especially if you have multiple individuals you need to make corrections for. You just want to make sure you're making corrections to the right individual. And so to look at what the actual problems are, these columns here will tell you exactly what is the issue. And so we can see there's an X here, so there's potentially multiple petition case numbers for John Doe. And then this shows that there's also potentially multiple dates of birth for John Doe. And we'll actually tell you the issues, the actual values that we're seeing. And so we let you know the petition case numbers that we've observed. And you can see there's 2 for John Doe when there should only be 1. And same with date of birth, we see 2 different dates of birth. And you'll have to correct those to make sure that they're consistent for John Doe. So to do that, we'll go back to the data extract and we've identified the rows we need to make corrections to. And so let's focus on petition case number first. So you can see that John has a record from April and May, but looking at the petition case number column, we can see that they're different. And it looks like it was probably a typo. So you would just verify what the correct one is. And so let's say the correct one is this ABCDEF one. So we'll just copy that and then paste that into the April row where there was a typo to make that consistent. And we'll just do the same thing for date of birth as well. Let's say we're looking at date of birth here and we see January 1st versus January 2nd. It was a typo, so we'll copy paste that so everything is the same. And so once you've resolved those two issues, that's it for that row. It shouldn't flag identifier anomalies in the future. So pretty straightforward there for identifier anomalies, but they are important to fix as if the identifier information isn't consistent for an individual, it's challenging to link records between uh, it's challenging to link records for the same person. And so we also can't carry forward the demographic information that you've entered for that individual when they first started. So yeah, just important to resolve these issues first. And they can resolve a lot of other issues down the line, as we'll see here as we move on to the petitioned individuals issues. So I would probably start with this tab next, unless you didn't have any petition individuals data, but this is usually where you'll see the most issues. So this tab is pretty similar to identifier anomalies in that it tells you where to make corrections within the data extract. And so here we can see this county has 3 issues. And so if you do have a lot of issues on this tab, it can be a little overwhelming. So one thing I would recommend is just filtering, going comment by comment or by data point. It can just make it a little easier to go through. But we're just going to walk through these, I think from top to bottom, and I'll show you how to make corrections to some of these issues that we're commonly seeing in SurveyMonkey data. And so for this first row, let's take a look at what's going on here. We could see that this issue is from Q2, specifically from June 30th reporting month. And it's for this individual, Sarah Smith. And if you scroll all the way to the right, you'll see what the actual data point is that is causing the issue. And so we can see it is 3.12.1 care agreement date. And the detail of issue tells us that the data is not reasonable given other data reported. And the comment gives us a little bit more context. It tells us that the care agreement date can't occur after the reporting month date, nor before the petition file date. So we can take a look here, and there's actually a couple helpful columns here in the QA report. It gives you the individual petition file date, date of investigation, and reporting month, so you can make these checks a little quicker. And so looking at column M here, so this is the data values column, and it tells us the value that was reported in SurveyMonkey for that data point. So we can see that we reported March 2nd, 2025 for the care agreement date for Sarah Smith. And so we can also see that in our longitudinal data extract. And so one thing I like to do is filter out the rows in my longitudinal data extract to make it a little easier to look at. So I'm just going to filter for Sarah Smith. And this issue is from June 30th, so I will filter for just June. Okay, perfect. We just have this one record. And I'm going to look at the care agreement date column because that's where the issue is. We can see we did indeed put March 2nd, 2025. And so the issue here is that it might be coming after the reporting month date or before the petition file date. So let's check both of those. So we know the reporting month date is June 30th. So it's coming before the reporting month date, so that's okay. So maybe there's something going on with the petition file date. And we can see the petition was only filed in May 10th, 2025. So having a care agreement date of March 2nd, which comes before May, doesn't make any sense there. So we'll verify. So you would verify on your back end to see what the actual care agreement date was. And so let's say you notice you made a typo, you put March instead of June. So to fix that, you would just fix the date right in that cell and just do a double check. So June 2nd does come before the June 30th reporting month, yet it also comes after the petition file date, which was May 10th. So everything is good with that now. So that issue is resolved. So we can move on to this next one here as well. So we're looking at this individual, John Doe again, for the reporting month, June 30th. And if you scroll right, you can see the exact issue. And so the issue with this one is if the client is reported in this reporting month, and that monthly data is required until the client exits the care process. So usually this error is flagged when we're expecting to see a record for an individual in a given month, but it's coming through as missing. So let's take a look at what's going on here in our data extract. So this time we're going to be looking for John Doe, not Sarah Smith. So we'll filter for John Doe. And we'll see that he has a record for April and May, but according to our QA report, he's missing a record for June 30th. So let's verify that's correct. We can go look at our care status data point. And we can see that for both April and May, John Doe was reporting 1, which is the initiation pending petition disposition care status. So since that's his care status, we know that he actually needs to be reporting monthly still if his care status is pending petition disposition. So he is indeed missing a record for June. And so let's say you go back to your internal data and you see that, okay, John Doe was still in the initiation period for June. So what you would have to do is add another record in a new line for June for John Doe and fill out the information correspondingly. And so if you don't want to fill in the information from scratch, like just type it in all the way through, um, somewhat of a shortcut can be done. So we know that John was in the initiation period from in April and May. So what you can do is copy one of the rows where he was in the initiation period, and then you can paste that into a new row and then change that reporting month date where you are missing the record, so June 30th. And so now this is a new record for June 30th. But we want you to make sure that the data is corresponding to June. So if something has changed between May and June, we want you to update those information. So just copying and pasting is probably not enough since there are probably some changes from month to month, but this will help you help give a guide to what data points are actually required. And I think it will probably help save some time. Just make sure that the data does reflect the reporting month and that you're not just copy pasting from each month. But all right, so that is that second issue is resolved. John is now not missing any data. All right, and we have one last issue I want to walk through here. And so it looks like it's for Sarah Smith in May. And the issue is that duplicate entries exist for this care participant. So let's take a look at Sarah Smith in May. And we can see, okay, there are 2 entries for Sarah in May. Now, this is not necessarily an issue if Sarah were to have two different care statuses in May. So let's say she switched from pending petition disposition to a care agreement, but we have to verify that. So if we look at her care status, we can see that she's actually just still in the pending petition disposition care status for both of those entries. So this would count as a duplicate entry for the month. So what you would want to do in this instance is look through which one of these records actually has the correct information, or if you need to, somehow like combine them. But basically you just want to keep one row for Sarah for May. So let's say you look through and actually the information is just the same, you just accidentally entered it twice. Then you can just simply delete the row there. And then just keep the row that you want. But that is it for that issue. That would resolve that last QA issue. And so that is all you would have to do for the report. And then once you make all the changes to your data extract, you want to just make sure all the rows are unfiltered and unhidden, and then upload it back to Move It. There are a few data points where they are laid out a little bit different. So just make sure to consult the data dictionary. The ones in particular are these criminal justice data points. So like number of arrests, number of jail days. So just make sure you're putting the correct values in the correct columns. And you can refer to the data dictionary specifications for those instructions. A similar data point would also be these inpatient and emergency department data points. You would enter the value if you know it in the second column, but then if it's unknown or none, you would enter that in the first column. So just be aware of those data points there. But aside from that, that is it for the demo. And I will just go over quickly some last tips. So in summary, we just want to recommend that you make corrections to identifier anomaly issues first, as I mentioned. Secondly, make sure that you're using the correct format for 3.1.2 reporting month. It should be the last day of the month. So if your reporting month is not the last day, it can actually trigger other QA issues. So just making sure all of those dates are the last day can be a quick fix for several issues. Next, we want to remind folks that you should be reporting monthly for care participants until they're dismissed. And you can take a look at this flow chart that we've provided, and you can see that for certain care statuses, we do require monthly reporting. And so you can also use this as a guide to see which data points are required for each care status. And then lastly, make sure that you use the Data Dictionary 2.0 to make sure corrections are made in compliance with the version 2 requirements for each data point. But with that, I'm going to pass it back to Carly to close out.
Thank you, Jessica. Just a few notes here on resubmission requirements. Once you've made your corrections to the longitudinal data extract, we ask that you please follow the file naming conventions listed here and upload that file to the submission folder on Move It. You'll also see you'll have a submission confirmation file that we're asking you to update. No changes are needed to the file naming convention for that file. It can be updated and then moved to the submission folder on Move It alongside your longitudinal data extract. A reminder here on deadlines, these files were distributed to counties on 11/4/2025. We are asking for corrections submitted back to us by 12/2/2025. This is an extension from the traditional deadline, which would have fallen on 11/26. And then to give counties some additional ability to focus on these cumulative corrections, we've also issued an extension to the Q3 initial submission deadline, which was initially scheduled for 11/29. These initial submissions are now due back to us on 12/15/2025. In addition to trainings like these, the HMA Care Act data team hosts bi-weekly data office hours. These take place every other Wednesday from 1 to 1:30 p.m. Pacific time. There is a registration link on the slides. We highly recommend joining. We're also available for one-on-one technical assistance during this cumulative resubmission window, but also at all times outside of this window as well. Please email us at caredatateam@healthmanagement.com with any questions or to request to set up a one-on-one call to review your files or your questions in detail. That's all from us. We hope this session was helpful. And again, please reach out with any questions.